Hello everyone, my name is Braun. I'm part of the GNU Radio leadership team, and in this video I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the organizational updates that will be coming for the GNU Radio project. Now when we talk about the GNU Radio project, we mean many different things depending on context. In some cases we talk about the source code itself, but in most cases we talk about just the overall, the summary of all the things that make up GNU Radio, that is GRCon and the community and the mailing list and whatever. For that we have a GNU Radio organization which has a leadership, and there will be some changes in this. Now for many of you this might not be relevant, but it is something that we want to be very clear about. So we want to talk about the changes that are coming, so there's no lack of transparency, there's no surprises. And also for those people who want to know who is the right person I can talk to when it comes to just general questions on GNU Radio, like who is the representative, like this might be interesting. Alright, let's head right into it. So here are the main things I want to talk about today. First of all, I'm going to quickly recap how GNU Radio is currently structured, like the actual structure of the organization as of today. I want to talk about why we're changing that, because changes are always disruptive in some way, and I want to motivate why they are important. Also, most importantly, what's the future structure? What's the future organization actually going to look like? And finally, when are we going to implement all of this? Okay, so like most open source projects, GNU Radio started off with a benevolent dictator model. So Eric Blossom basically founded the project, and he was the decider on pretty much anything. At the beginning it was also just the code and the mailing list really. So there was a matter of what got merged, and that was pretty much it. But GNU Radio has evolved a lot. We've had two major leadership changes since Eric Blossom started. First, Tom Rondo took over from Eric, and then Ben took over from Tom. And as we're going to learn later, Ben is also going to be passing on the baton this year as well. So there's going to be another leadership change. And every time we had a leadership change, there was also some kind of evolution of the project. For example, when Tom was the leader, we established GRCon, and we had a lot of focus on growing the community. We had more formal roles outside of the principal leader, like the number one, the benevolent dictator, established, and Ben did a lot of work in that area. We now have a separate maintainer from the leadership, which was also not the case when Tom or Eric was the leader, and so on and so on. There was always a lot of changes. And we are going to continue that trend in the future. Alright, so this is what GNU Radio looks like today from an organizational aspect. So Ben Hilburn, I already mentioned him before, is currently the president of GNU Radio. And there's a bunch of people who are the officers of GNU Radio. And those two groups, like the president and the officers, they make up the leadership. But then there's like plenty of other people involved in GNU Radio, like all the contributors, like the people who spend like insane amounts of work making GRCon happen, for example. Like what about those? How do they fit in? So I drew those arrows between these bubbles, but what do they really mean? Like what is the relationship between the president and the officers, for example? And of course, like what is the relationship between the community and the officers? Like we don't really know these things. So you can see I'm already alluding to why we actually have to make some changes here. So this is what our structure currently looks like. So these are the leadership in alphabetical order by first name. I added some areas of activity, mostly as an anchor. This is not really representative exactly of what people are doing. For example, Derek is our contact for the GRCon team, but he's not the GRCon chair. And obviously Ben plays an important role here, being the president, and so on and so on. So let's talk about this. Why is Ben the president? Well, because Tom said he shall be the next person to run the project. And then Ben appointed a bunch of officers. So if we continue this, if we were not going to change anything, the person who would be the president after Ben should be someone that Ben appoints. So we would have succession, almost like a a monarchy, something like that. Officers are added, removed at the benevolent dictator's behest. So there's no process for becoming an officer. Really, Ben just decided these are the right people. I think these are all good choices. But it's very arbitrary. So when we've added people in the past, it was usually someone doing great work, and then someone from the offices said, "Hey, how about we add this guy?" And then it got decided, and that was that. So works, but I think there's room for improvement. So we don't have any kind of decision made at all for what happens if the president just leaves. Like, what if he's gone? And also, what about the officers? Like, do they get a say in change? Like, what if the officers don't like what the president is doing, which is luckily not the case right now, but what if? And we talked about the code of conduct a lot, but it's not represented in this organization. That's also a problem. Like, what if one of these officers, for example, violates the code of conduct? Like, what happens then? Like, who is in charge of taking care of that? We just don't have any of that figured out. So all of these reasons lead into why we need a change. So I'm painting this in pretty dark colors. In fact, the current leadership has been very, very effective. Like, we've gotten very far. The project has grown a lot. We've been pretty successful. But we don't think this is the way to go for a long time, a decade-long future of GNU Radio. And so we need to be more sustainable. And this is going to be more and more important because as we're partnering up with other groups, these could be universities or government entities, industry, other organizations, or most recently the SETI Institute, we have to prove that we are reliable, we are organized, and we have a proper organization. So also, the leadership is becoming more and more, I don't want to say difficult, it's always been difficult, but the amount of things that the leadership has to take care of is increasing. So for example, as part of the SETI Institute, we have now a way to, a good way to earn money. We've always had a way to earn money. But for example, we can take care of grants. And we have actually, we actually do have a little bit of money at this point in time, which we mostly use for things like travel stipends, etc. So, someone needs to be responsible for that. But what's most annoying about all of this, there's no transparency. It's unclear to people outside, or even people inside the officer list, how changes are made. So we would like to write that down. Okay, so I will present the proposed structure, but we have not actually approved and decided upon the structure yet. So it's entirely possible that this might change. I don't think it'll change in a major fashion, but I'm just take all of the following slides as a solid suggestion about what we're actually going to do. So the biggest and most important body of the future organization, that is the GNU Radio organization, is going to be the General Assembly. And the General Assembly, the members of the General Assembly, those are the leadership of GNU Radio. So in succession terms, the General Assembly holds the same role as the officers do currently. And as a matter of fact, we've decided when we inaugurate the new organization, just to have some kind of continuity, we will have the officers become the first General Assembly, just so there's the least amount of surprise and arbitrariness involved, even though there was a certain amount of arbitrariness in how we got to the current state. The General Assembly is, like I said, the most important body of the new GNU Radio organization. It makes all major decisions, but typically those decisions will be strategic. So it'll not be deciding day-to-day stuff. For example, will pull request number 3924 be merged? And that was just a random number, by the way. I just made that up. I don't want to call out a specific pull request. What's important is that only natural persons can be members of the General Assembly. That's something we want to write down straight away, which means a company, for example, could not be a member of the General Assembly. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the biggest change, and I think the most important one, is how the General Assembly is comprised. So like I said, we're going to bootstrap it with the current officer list. However, we intend to grow the General Assembly. And there will be a transparent, a clear process for how to do that. Now, you don't have to be a member of the General Assembly. In fact, we will try and grow it slowly, just for stability reasons. There's plenty of things that people can do and hopefully will do in the GNU Radio Project, that does not require being a member of the General Assembly, because being a member of the General Assembly comes with a certain amount of time commitment. So members are expected to have some amount of time for the project, similar to, you know, really any kind of organization, or even clubs are often organized that way. However, if, you know, there's someone in the greater community that, you know, has either said that they want to become a member, or maybe it's the other way around, where the General Assembly like asks someone, hey, you're doing a lot of great work, you want to become a member of the General Assembly, we will now have a process for that. It'll include a vote, so the General Assembly decides who joins their ranks. But it's going to be, like I said, like the rules of the process will be transparent. Now, I mentioned that the day-to-day decisions will not be handled by the General Assembly. Instead, those will be done by the board. The board is what's going to be replacing the current role of the president, or the benevolent dictator. The future board will not be a single person like the president, but will be a triplet, a triumvirate, whatever you want to call it. So there will still be a president who is also on the board, and then there will be two proxies. Maybe we'll come up with better names like vice president or treasurer or something like that. But the idea is there'll be three people who are, you know, basically running the project, if you like. And these three board members have to come out of the General Assembly, and the General Assembly elects these people. And there will be a term limit for boards, so if you're elected to the board now, that means your term will expire in 2 years, and everyone knows that. That's not going to be a surprise. So if you know someone on the board and you know that their term is up in 6 months, for example, you say, well, are you intending on running for, you know, board? And that way we can always, you know, provide good input to what it is that people provide good input to the question who's actually running the project now and also in the future. The board will be doing most of the day-to-day decisions, like I said earlier, including authority over our finances. Hopefully, you know, we will have you know, plenty of money that they can actually have the authority over, but that also comes with a responsibility. And this responsibility is something that they carry back to the General Assembly. So the General Assembly also watches over, is the board doing their job well? And, you know, in extreme cases can also remove a board again. So the board can't really do something against the will of the General Assembly, but the will of the General Assembly is supposed to be on a more strategic level. So, for example, General Assembly could say, please spend money towards more educational purposes for, let's say, high school and college level students. And then the board, you know, can actually talk to high schools and colleges and come up with ways to actually spend that money, for example. The code of conduct is something I mentioned earlier. It's something we started introducing a long time ago, like even at the early GRCons, but it really sort of came into place, I can't remember exactly when, a few years ago. And something that has been brought up is that we have the code of conduct, but we have no clear way of enforcing it. So what happens when a code of conduct violation actually happens is unclear. For that purpose, we will have a code of conduct team, which to avoid conflict of interest is separate from the board. Because of that, trying to avoid the conflict of interest, that also means that the code of conduct team can you know, be mostly advisory. To be honest, we still have to figure out the exact details of this relationship. Like the code of conduct team might not be elected, and then it would be wrong to give them you know, powers that should be with the board. On the other hand, they are watching over a very important thing, that is the code of conduct, so we'll have to see how that plays out. Which, you know, footnote, like, this is all not complete. We are definitely still in an early phase, but we think that the structure is good enough to you know, run by itself and then be improved in the future. So speaking of which, we are definitely planning on making changes. For example, one thing that we could consider is like adding such a thing as a supporting member. Now, a supporting member would not have a vote on the General Assembly, but could provide input or support. And that support could also be financial. So, for example, if a sponsor would like to say, yeah, we want to be more involved in GNU Radio in a support role, and we could also see us, I don't know, paying for things like in-kind donations or direct cash donations, something like that. They could be they could become a supporting member. But this is like, the box is gray to indicate that we don't really have that in our statute yet, or in our Articles of Association. What we're definitely not planning to do is have a sort of 501c6 style organization like the Linux Foundation, where the members are actually companies and they themselves decide how the future of the project is. So the General Assembly, consisting of natural persons, will remain the sole body to actually make decisions. So you've all heard the good news that the GNU Radio and SETI Institute are partnering up. The SETI Institute obviously is a bit bigger than the GNU Radio organization, so we're sort of embedded in there somewhere. And the board plays an important role as being the primary contact to the SETI Institute. So within the board, hopefully, that's sort of the plan at least, there shall be a principal investigator. The principal investigator is the person who is in charge of, like overseeing research projects or grants, for example. So right now, Derek Kozel is our principal investigator. We had to appoint someone, not that that was a bad choice, I think it's a great choice, but we had to appoint someone absent the existence of a board so that we could actually get the collaboration going. So Derek Kozel is not on the board because we have not elected one yet, but he is the principal investigator, and he is also an officer. So the SETI Institute, keep in mind, is an extremely important partner. We're very happy to be partnered with the SETI Institute for many reasons, but it now gives us the ability, which we didn't really have in that way in the past, to run funded programs. These might be government-funded programs, for example. Might be an NSF program or a Deutsche Forschungsgesellschaft or something like that. Educational grants, whatever. The SETI Institute is really good at doing these kind of things, and they can help us with like administering, handling the finances and stuff like that, which we really don't, have any manpower or expertise in doing. So the PI is in charge of overseeing that. However, I would like to stress the fact that you do not have to be on the General Assembly to become involved in this. So if someone in the community thinks it would be great to run a certain program, like approach us please, and then we can use the PI to work with the SETI Institute to get these things rolling. All right, where are we right now? So, like I said earlier, transparency is very important for us. So what we are going to do is we're going to write what I just had as a block diagram or as an organizational chart down as our Articles of Association. We already have a draft which basically contains all the things that I just presented, and they will be published eventually, and they will become the rulebook for how to run our organization. So everyone can actually read up how we make our decisions, whether or not you're on the General Assembly. So this is not a secret document. We can change the Articles of Association by majority votes, and changes to the Articles of Association, as well as like the decision that went along with that, any major decision that the General Assembly makes in general will all be published on Git or GitHub. So you can follow the tracks. We'll probably also use the mailing list and Twitter and whatnot to keep people updated. But the idea behind that was that we can come up with a skeleton for the Articles of Association right now, which will be sufficient to run the project, but we will not lock ourselves down by, I mentioned earlier we want to maybe add supporting members, like that's not in the AOA, we might want to add it in the future, so we have a process on how to change that. Quick footnote, writing an AOA or an Articles of Association document is, there's a lot of language in there, so we actually borrowed a lot of the content from KDE and many other organizations such as FSFE. FSFE is the Free Software Foundation Europe, which is a completely different organization than the FSF, the Free Software Foundation is based in the United States. They're more organized like an organization, like a democratic organization, and they have some really good rules. I'd like to thank all of those for putting their documents online so we could use them. Okay, so what happens now? Soon after GRCon, and it's a shame that we weren't able to do this before GRCon, the current officers will meet in an official capacity, and then we'll vote on the AOA, if they get approved by all of them, we are now an organization, and then we will elect a board from the newly formed General Assembly. And when that happens, we will have our new organization in place, and now we can add members to the General Assembly. We can make decisions on, I don't know, changes to the AOA, which was probably a bit early. We don't have anything. We will probably have other things that we want to do first, and so on. However, we can't just do them willy-nilly anymore, because now we have the AOA written down, which dictates how we can make these changes. And that's, I think, the most important and powerful change here. That's like the missing transparency that we always needed. I don't know if we always needed it, because like I said earlier, we've gotten really far with our current structure, but I think we will be needing it going forward. Okay, that is my organizational update. If you think it's a bit thin right now, then I apologize, because we don't have the final document yet. There's actually not a lot, or really anything, that I've left out, other than who will become the board and what exactly will be like the precise language of the AOA, because those things, like I said, aren't finalized. And as soon as we have them, we will obviously update everyone and let you know what came out of it. So this is an entire process designed to keep everyone in the loop and to make sure everyone knows what's coming and also when it's coming. So maybe around GRCon we will have our elections, which means if there's a leadership change in the future, we'll be able to announce it immediately at GRCon, but you'll also read about it on the mailing list and in the same GitHub repository that'll store the articles of association and General Assembly decisions and so on and so on. Okay, I hope there'll be a lively discussion in chat. Obviously, as I'm recording this, I won't know, but yeah, I really appreciate questions, and especially questions around how people can be involved. And I would like to thank everyone for listening in and tuning in and being members of the greater organization. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.